Welcome to this episode of Formed, where we talk about navigating life as followers of Jesus, how to live out our faith in such a challenging world where there is so much temptation to go down the wrong path, and yet so much hope and opportunity to thrive, to discover our purpose, to lead as God called us to lead, and to have the relationships we were born to have. In today's episode, we talk about finance with some of my most financially savvy friends. We talk about tithing. We talk about radical generosity. We talk about who pays for dates and how to make decisions in marriage and how to determine and face the facts before going broke pursuing your dream. We had so much fun in this conversation. We hope it blesses you as much as it blessed me.
Lord, thank you for your grace over this conversation. Thank you for Holy Spirit moments where you lead, you guide, and you direct us. We are so grateful that we get to be sons in your kingdom. And I'm praying, God, that through this conversation, we pray that your sons and daughters would be encouraged as well in Jesus' name.
Amen.
Amen.
Amen. Okay. Jesus talked a lot about money. Scholars estimate that about 25% of his teachings and as much as half of his parables were about money and generosity, because God cares very deeply about how we view money and how we treat money, because it reflects how we view God and how we treat God. What do we spend money on? What do we save money for? All of this reflects on God and reflects on ourselves. Joining me today are two men who are way more savvy about money than I am, and they're going to help share some wisdom that God teaches us about money and that can really help us in life. So, guys, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for
Wes
having
and
me.
Darren,
Yeah.
can you introduce yourselves? Tell us who you are and a little bit about your background.
Sure. I'm Darren. I'm 52 years old. I was divorced for about 10 years before I met my girlfriend, Erica. And I'm a product manager. I spent most of my career working in video games. But early in my career, I worked for Bank of America, where I got to help launch the first online banking with free bill pay.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's great.
Very cool.
This didn't come up over breakfast.
No, it
That's really,
didn't.
that's amazing.
How about you, Wes?
My name is Wes, and my wife Vanessa and I, we're actually coming up on our 18th anniversary as of this filming in about 2 weeks. We'll celebrate 18
Congratulations.
years.
Awesome.
We have two kids, a 13-year-old boy and a 9-year-old daughter. And I work both in the nonprofit space as a lead pastor of a church, but I also work in the for-profit space as a money manager.
All right. And we should note that Wes has written an amazing book about this very topic, which is finance, which is how we best handle our money. It's called Roadmap to Your Financial Freedom 10 Practical Steps for Tough Financial Times. Urge everyone to read it. It's a great book and it's very clear and very simple and will help you a lot. It definitely helped me a lot as I was reading it. All right, let's get right into it and talk about probably one of the most uncomfortable and controversial topics, and that is tithing. Uh, the Bible does talk about tithing. It's not terribly clear about how much we should tithe. I mean, one model is the 10% that the Israelites donated to the Levitical priests of their crops and of their livestock. Many people use that as their guide for tithing. My first question to both of you is, why should we tithe? Wes, you write about it in your book.
Yeah.
You go first.
Well, tithe is a test. That's really what it is. It's a test of your heart. Jesus actually says that wherever your treasure is, that's where your heart will be.
Mhm.
So our heart follows our treasure. Some people say, well, my heart's over here, but your money's over. Well, no, wherever your money is, that's where your heart is going to go towards. Any of us who invest in a stock or a mutual fund or a company, we watch that company. Any news that comes up about it, why our heart is going in that direction. And in the Old Testament, they had a more agrarian society. And so they would bring a tenth of their agriculture to the priest, to the Lord. Well, we don't live in an agrarian society. I have a small garden at my house. I've got some, rosemary and mint and, lemons and stuff like that. So I guess I could bring a tenth of that to the Lord.
It's a little agrarian.
Yeah, it's a little bit. But for most of us, we get a paycheck. And so I would be of the argument that Jesus actually did teach on tithing. And it's actually one of the things that he explicitly says that we should do.
All right. Darren, how about you?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's about I mean, kind of as Wes was saying, it's about heart posture, and it's about, I mean, I think this will come up a lot in today's conversation, but I think it's a lot about, like, putting your money where your mouth is
Yeah,
and kind of walking the talk, and money is a big expression of kind of what we believe and what we, and that sort of thing. And I think also I'm of the opinion that everything that I have is really God's, and that I'm just here to steward it for a short time. And so I feel like giving is just an expression of that.
People seem to have two main obstacles to tithing. Both seem fair. One is that they've seen too many churches, too many pastors misuse that the money they do give to the church. So let's talk about that one first. What would you say to someone who says, I'm not sure I want to tithe because I've seen so much abuse of it? Wes.
I would say to them, I get it. I totally understand. There are, whether it's in any positions of power, whether it's within the church or government, money has this ability to also corrupt our hearts when it takes the throne. And so, when someone would say, "Hey, I don't want to give because I see it misused or the perception of misuse," I get it. I would still give, as unto the Lord, but I get it where if someone says, "Hey, I've got a question about that," there are a few. I think it's definitely the minority of the cases of the tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of churches throughout America. You see a couple small cases where it's, I'm not the judge, but I would, maybe look at that and say, "Hey, I would have some questions as well."
And the other concern is, and you hear this a lot, it's like, I'm barely getting by as it is. I'm living paycheck to paycheck. I can't afford to tithe. Darren, what would you say to that person?
I mean, again, I think it comes down to heart posture. I think it really and I don't actually think that money is necessarily everything. I think, you can give in other ways as well. You can give of your time and that sort of thing. Which the other piece, which kind of coming back to having discernment, I think if you can volunteer and I mean, I was lucky to be on the board of directors of a nonprofit, and so I saw how they were using the money, and I was like, okay, I feel comfortable giving my money to them. But you don't always have that. Not everyone has that ability to do that. But you can also volunteer. You can get involved in an organization. You get a sense of what they're doing, and also there's specific causes that you can give to, where maybe they're saying, okay, well, we're fundraising for this specific need. Do you want to give for that? And I think that's really helpful as well.
You make a great point, Darren, in that time, giving of your time is also a form of generosity to the church. I remember struggling with the actual amount. We talked about 10%, and I remember wondering 10% of my gross or 10% of my net. And, I've heard sermons too. It's like, well, if you can afford it, you should actually give more than 10%. I remember John Montgomery talking about friends that give 30%, 40%, 50%. The richer you are, the higher percentage you can give. So maybe you guys can talk about how you calculate that number.
Well, first, if I could go back to the former question about how could I tithe, especially in this economy right now?
Affordability.
Gas prices are near $7 a gallon in some parts of LA, and other parts of the country. They're high as well. And one of my mentors said this phrase, and when he said it, it just struck such a great chord. He talked about moving toward the tithe. See, for some people, they go from 0% to how could I ever give 10%? It's like when gas went from $3 to $7 a gallon. That's such a huge shock to them. But he said, hey, move towards the tithe. And it's a faith step of, "Hey, Lord, I can't do this, but here's where I'm gonna start." I think that's a good step forward rather than just giving up and saying, "Well, I could never," like, if we were teaching on prayer, we would never say, "You have to pray for an hour." Say, "We'll start with 5 minutes." Just you're working towards a prayerful life, and so, that's where I would start with that. And then to your question on, do I tithe on the gross? Do I tithe on the net? Do I tithe on this? I have probably a stronger stance on that than most, and it's not because, I'm a pastor of a church, it's actually what my wife and I practice. Proverbs 3 talks about, bringing, the first fruits to the Lord, and Malachi 3 talks about, bring all the tithe, and also Jesus, it's one of the few things that he says, "You should do this. You should tithe." And the New Living Translation says it like this, "You should tithe, yes." And it's within the context of a greater conversation about, like, love and justice and mercy. So say, "You should tithe, but tithing does not neglect doing good things as well. And so I want God's blessing over everything. So my wife and I, we tithe on everything. We tithe when, a book sale happens. We tithe when, some property deal, anything comes through, because we recognize all of this. We didn't make this. Like we're His. We're the sheep of His pasture.
Follow-up question before we move on to our next topic is when we give to other organizations, other Christian organizations, parachurch organizations, does that count as a tithe, or is tithing specifically meant for the church?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I have, I personally don't think it's about the church specifically. I mean, I think that there's a lot of organizations that are doing the Lord's work that goes beyond the church, but the church, of course, is a focal point as well. But
Okay. And you said you had your own thought on this?
Yeah. I think the tithe belongs to the local church that you're a part of as an act of worship to the Lord.
Mm,
And I think that you can give on top of that to other organizations that you're passionate about. And this is something I would personally practice as well. 10% of everything that we get goes to the Lord through our local church. But then there's other causes that we're very passionate about. My wife and I are very passionate about, and we want to make a difference in those. And so I would argue that for some, when they say, "Oh, I can only do this or this," I would say, "Well, you can actually do probably a little bit more."
mhm.
And, the people that are, more generosity minded, a lot of them, I would say they have the gift of giving, but it just maybe hasn't been implemented yet. And so I would say, "Hey, you can give your 10% to the Lord through your local church," where, Malachi 3 says, "Bring, to the tithes to the storehouse," that local storehouse.
Mhm.
But ask God for blessings to bless you with more. Say, "Hey, Lord, there's a foster care, ministry, that meets, in our part of the San Fernando Valley." It's something that just the Lord's given us a heart for. So I'm like, "Lord, I've got this deal come up. I hope it comes up," because we want to give not only the tithe, but then if this deal comes up, we'll have extra that we can give towards that.
And we will talk later about how God blesses generosity,
Yeah.
and enables us to be even more generous. Let's talk about affordability. Very serious question. People are just scraping by. We talked about baby steps,
yeah.
but even that might be a struggle for people. So, what kind of practical things can we do to be able to tithe, even though we don't feel like we have anything?
So yeah, so there's two thoughts that I had. One is, there's the thought of like your cup and whether your cup is full, and if your cup is empty, then it's like you may not have anything to give financially. Also, like on the airplane, when you get the oxygen mask, they always tell you to put your mask on first before you put the mask on, someone dependent on you. So I mean, I think there is something about making sure that your needs are taken care of. So if you're struggling financially, then maybe that's not the area that you're called to give. But you can also volunteer. I mean, I know I was challenged to volunteer at my church, and I got put on the parking as as one of the parking guys.
That's a tough
Um,
job.
Yeah. That's when you can really say, "I really love the Lord."
yeah, yeah, and I think kind of coming back to that question about also like do we give to the church specifically? And this may come across initially as like consumerist, and I don't mean it to, but like if you go to a coffee shop or a nice restaurant, it's like it's expected that you're gonna pay however many dollars for the coffee or for the meal. But I think oftentimes you can just roll into church and just be like, oh, well, that was free sermon. And I think, but if you're going, I think, you should feel like, well, I want to contribute in some way. And maybe it's not money, but maybe it's volunteering on the parking team or whatever. So yeah, I think it's important to give.
I think that's a great point because a lot of people come into the church with this, "Oh, this is all free" mentality, whereas nothing is free. The church has to cover all the costs to look after your kids and to
Hmm.
serve you coffee and to provide all the things that a church provides. But Wes,
Yeah, so you had asked about affordability, and one of the things this is so tough because on one hand, I've actually talked with single parents. I said, "Hey, if you're going to give, please don't give your rent money, and please don't give your kids Christmas money. Like, don't take from your kids, plate and give it to the Lord. And now you're saying, hey, sorry, Tommy, we don't get lunch today." Um,
that's not what the widow's mite was supposed to
yeah,
teach. Yeah, yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
And so, but on the other hand, I do see that the Lord rewards faith.
Mm,
And my wife and I also, we practiced that for a while when we first moved to LA, as I was just getting professionally into the investment space. It takes years to build that business up. And we were still tithing, but we are tithing while we are running a deficit. And so we had this nest egg that we had saved. And so that was something that we practiced. But here's the thing is the Lord's not a debtor to anyone. And so we did see him do exceedingly abundantly above whatever we could ask, think, or imagine. And at the same time, there's this pressure of, hey, if you want to give and sacrifice, when you don't have it, that's between you and the Lord. And I do know that if you do that in faith, the Lord will bless you.
Yes.
I just don't know if I want to be the guy who's like, hey, you should give your last dollar to the Lord rather than, paying LADWP.
Here's the tough part though, and you talk about this in your book. It's like, can you forego one night a week not going out to dinner? Can you
Yeah.
forego that
Right.
extra piece of clothing that you don't really need
Right.
to be able to give? And the idea that actually most of us, even though we're running on a really thin margin, when we look at our expenses, we actually can afford to give.
Yeah, you could most people could take a small step. I've lost track of how many, especially young people, they're like, "Oh, I'm so broke." Like, "Oh man, I'm so sorry. How can I help? What do we do?" Like, "Hey, hey, you guys wanna go grab coffee?" I'm like, "Well, are we gonna go to Denny's? Or are we gonna go to a cheap spot?" They're like, "No, there's this spot." And it's like, "That's a $7 pour over."
Right.
So the guy who just told me he's broke is getting a set, and then the next day, "Hey, well, I'm gonna go grab a coffee." Wait, this is a habit of yours? And so, I wonder for some people when they say, "Hey, things are tight." There are some the reality is there are some people who are having real life difficulties, especially
Yeah.
in LA.
Mhm.
We have an expensive city.
Yeah.
Us, San Fran, that we had
Yes.
talked about over breakfast, all of the major metropolitan areas of Manhattan, the cost of living is exponentially
Mm.
it's almost impossible to keep up with. But if you're adding to that your avocado toast, your pour over coffees, your nice clothes, your Uber Eats, it's all these, people who are like, "Oh, things are tough." And I'm like, "What do you?" "Oh, I'm ordering lunch." And it's like, "Well, I made lunch," So,
Mhm.
I just wonder if that's a part of the conversation.
But as you both said, the mentality makes all the difference in the
Yeah.
world. Yes, it's costing you something, but you're also sowing into
Yeah.
something. You're also storing treasures in heaven, even if it's a little tiny treasure in the
Mhm.
world's eyes, in God's eyes, because He knows your life and He knows how difficult it is, and He sees that sacrifice.
Yep.
Alright, let me bring up something we talked about over breakfast today on the topic of a radical generosity.
Mm.
And we see this throughout the book of Acts, especially at the beginning of the book of Acts, where they're this very tight knit community. They are worshiping the Lord. It's a very small group at this point. We just have a couple hundred believers, but there is this extreme radical generosity where what you have, I have, what I have, you have, and it's not like a socialism where government is forcing it, but it
Exactly.
is it is a community connection where if you have a need, I've got you, and if I have a
Mhm.
need, I know that you've got me. One of the guys, Barnabas, they called him son of encouragement. Also, which he also happened to be a guy who like there were guys there who sold land and brought it to the church and said, "Hey, I got this property. I just want to give it to God." It's like I'll call you a son of encouragement if you do that as well. So let me ask you guys this question about that radical generosity. How have you guys seen that? Have you ever practiced it? Where did you see God show up?
Darren, you first.
I mean, it was my grandmother really modeled this for me, from some of my earliest memories are going around and volunteering with her at various, like, senior homes and other things, and, I mean, even later on into life, she was doing Meals on Wheels. She actually could go on and on about my grandmother's generosity, but she did Meals on Wheels to the point where she was delivering food to people who were older than she was. But, and then also for her, it was giving. Was a big part of what she did as well. And so I think that really made an impression on me from an early age. And yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah, my grandma was the same way, and I saw her generosity. It's easy to see in the context of family. Of course, people make sacrifices and they give to family, but she really inspired me with her sacrifice for us. Everything that she had, everything that she did was for us. And I felt like that kind of planted the seed that it's not about us.
Mhm.
And I learned later on, how counterintuitive God's plan is, but that if you're obedient and you're faithful and you are generous, that God honors that. The instinctive thing that we have in our broken selves is well, if we don't take care of ourselves 100% of the time, we're
Mm.
going to be lacking and we're going to be missing something. Whereas the Bible teaches us if we are other centered, if we are generous to others, we will reap far more. And it took me a long time to realize that. But then I saw it happen repeatedly when I would think about giving a gift or making a donation or giving to a friend in need. And I hesitated and I thought, oh, well, this is a lot of money. Say a wedding gift. They really need this, but that's the most expensive item on the menu on the registry, and I hesitate a little bit, and I said, I just feel led to go with it." Something would happen, like, months later, I'd get a raise at work, and then I realized, that God tells us
Mhm.
that He is generous to those who are generous, and it's not being generous so that we can go out and buy an extra pair of shoes, it's generous so we can continue to be generous with others and that it's a continual counterintuitive flowing thing that God does, but it takes that heart posture of faith, really, of trust that, okay, I'm not going to lose something by being generous. I'm actually going to gain something.
Let me follow up to something that you said about your grandma. Both you guys brought up the previous generation. So, some economic indicators just came out this morning. And part of my job is I'm always having to watch the market, I'm always having to watch the news.
Hmm.
Um, there was a story that had come out that there was one private equity firm that sent an analyst out to physically look at the Strait of Hormuz during all of this. And so there's like it's like this investment lore of this person who goes out there and they're watching the boats and they've got binoculars. They're not relying on anyone else's research, but because
Hmm.
of that, inflation is up a little bit more than people are expecting. Gas prices are up. In this economy, how can you practice that radical generosity, especially when there's this fear of, are we going to go to war? What's going to happen in the elections? How does someone practice radical generosity when there's maybe, I would say, a little bit of fear in the air?
Great
Yeah.
point. I'll
It's
go first,
yeah, yeah.
actually, because it made me think of my own experience as a news person. And when COVID hit, you remember at
Mm,
the very beginning of COVID, people were
it
hoarding
was crazy.
at supermarkets.
Right.
The toilet paper of all things.
No toilet
Yeah.
paper, no basic goods. And I remember interviewing a store manager, a
Mm,
representative from Ralph's, and you could tell how distraught he was. And I'll never forget the point he made. People just shop the way they normally shop, which is for the week or for the next couple of weeks, because our supply chain is built on that. I guarantee you, everybody will have what they need.
Mm.
But shopping and
yeah.
hoarding in this way just makes it difficult for us to be able to provide for everybody, which we can do and will do if everybody just kind of calms down and thinks of the big picture. And it goes to what you were saying about the Acts 2 church. Everyone share with those who have need. And so I would say that in this really difficult economic time that we're facing right now, again, it's a time to kind of calculate, okay, this is going to cost me more, this is going to cost me more, this is going to cost me more too. Where can I not dramatically change the way I do things and not have the instinct to hoard? Because in a way, not being generous and not giving is a form of hoarding, right?
Yeah.
Mhm.
It's hard to think of it that way, but it kind of is in God's eyes. So, how can I maybe make adjustments to my life so I can still give? That's how I would answer it. I know it's extraordinarily difficult for some people, and but I believe that God really sees your heart behind that, and He really honors that because I've seen that happen in my own life.
And yeah, and I think like since the question started with my grandmother, I mean, she grew up in Canada during the Depression, so she was a child of the Great
Wow.
Depression, and I saw that in just a lot of the ways that she lived her life. You know, when she was cooking, it's like you couldn't waste any of the food; you had to cook all of it, and you had to eat all of it. But also, that didn't stop her generosity.
Yeah.
And I think, and part of that I think is fear. We talked about fear. I think fear is a big it's an opportunity. Fear is a big thing. It can motivate us to do things. It can motivate us to make bad investments. It can motivate us to not tithe, but it's an opportunity to have faith.
Yeah.
And that's where, yeah.
Speaking of which, Matthew 6,
Yeah.
Jesus goes on at length about how God provides and how we should not worry
Yeah.
about it. Even in the worst of economic times, he says, look how I feed the birds of
Yeah.
the
Look
air.
at the birds.
Look at
Yeah.
how I clothe the
Yeah.
lilies in the field. They don't worry about stock markets or
Yeah.
any of those
Yeah.
things.
Yeah.
I will provide. I remember a friend telling me he was in dire economic straits and he couldn't even afford shampoo. And I remember him praying and praying and praying into the
Wow.
Lord, into his promise of provision. And he was going to the cafeteria, he was in college, and he saw that they were giving away free shampoo. It was just something that came in as a donation to the school, and everybody could get free little bottles of shampoo. And he was like, that's God. That's
Yeah.
God's
Come
promise that
on.
he will provide. He will
Yeah.
provide somehow. He has promised it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I remember there was one time, actually, I felt like the Lord called me to radical generosity and I didn't do it.
Mm.
And
You write
this,
about this in the book. I remember.
yes. And this was one of the hardest life lessons. Because I felt like the Holy Spirit says, "Hey, I want you to give." I just felt this nudging one day. I want you to go do radical generosity. So all the fear stuff starts coming in. And because this sounds so sinful, but because I'm a finance guy, I start thinking, I was like, how can I make this a write off? Like, it sounds so bad, but it's like, how can I make this a write off? How can I, how can I attach this to something rather than just obedience?
But it's very normal. It's very
Yeah.
natural. Everybody thinks this.
And, uh, about I didn't do anything. I did what lots of Christians do. "Hey, I'm gonna pray on it," which means I'm gonna disobey. And, uh, and so I went and prayed on it. My wife's like, "Hey, yeah, do whatever you wanna do." It was a lot of money for us, and so, you said, "I want you to send it to this person," and I didn't do it. 3 months later, they put out this post on social media saying, "Hey, thank you everyone for your prayers. The spouse had been diagnosed with cancer 3 months ago." And I started doing the numbers backwards, and I saw that it was at the exact time the Lord said, "Write them a big check."
Mm.
Oh, man, I wept. I cried so much because I knew I could have my act of just obedience to the Lord, which would have been radical generosity in that moment, could have been a breath of fresh air to that other person.
Mhm.
And so I made a promise right then, "Lord, I will never disobey you again."
Mm.
Now that I know it's radical generosity is not easy, it's a step of faith, and it's painful, but disobedience is far more painful. So I was like, "Okay, I'm gonna always obey God in that." And then we ended up sitting down to lunch with this couple and say, "Hey, this is I repented. I gave them a just, an envelope filled with cash. This is yours." And I'm crying and asking for forgiveness, with an envelope of cash, so but from that point on, I would tell her now, "Hey, this is something I feel like we're supposed to do." And by the way, in that moment, she was one encouraging us, like, "Go for it." And I was like, "Ah, I'm scared, but I won't ever miss that one again."
I'm going to use that line in a sermon. Wes Dunn said, radical generosity is painful, but disobedience is far more painful.
Yeah.
That's great.
All right. Thanks to all the single men who submitted questions to the show. They all seem to fall around the same topic about how to manage and share finances between couples before and after marriage. This is a big topic.
It's a big one.
We know statistically finance is a make or break moment for many relationships. Let's start with an easy one. As men, do we pay for the first date? The second, when is it cool to split the bill?
Ha ha ha. I'll start.
Yeah, I'll let you go first on this.
Yes, first date. Yes, second date. Yes, third date. I would say obviously do the dates that you can afford.
Yeah.
Um, I would think most guys would agree going out to an expensive dinner on the first date, even if you can afford it, is the wrong message to
Might be a bit
send.
overkill, yeah.
Yeah, overkill. Um, I would say, this is my personal thought, you pay for dates until she offers. And if she never offers, that tells you something about
Right.
her and her character.
Mm.
I took my wife on maybe 2 or 3 dates, and then on the 4th date, she planned this amazing date
Oh, wow.
and paid for everything. I mean, we this incredible, tour of the city, and we went to spot after spot after spot, and she just planned and took care of everything, and it warmed my heart. It told me something about her. It
Yeah.
told me that she is in it as much as I am in it. So as men, I do believe we take the lead. We pay for the first date. We pay for the second date. I also don't think, even if we think it's time for her to offer, we don't say something like, "Hey, can you pay for the next date?" Or, I don't know if this is still a term. Can we go Dutch?
Yeah.
Is Dutch
Mm.
still a thing?
Yeah,
Does
are we
Gen
allowed to say
Z,
that?
does
Yeah.
Gen Alpha say Dutch?
Do they end? Yeah.
I just think that that's tacky. I'd rather take someone out on a
Yeah,
date that I can afford than ask them to go Dutch.
that's great.
That's
So
my
you
thought.
said pay for first, second, just pay until she offers.
Yeah, I think so because then it establishes, because they wanna know how serious you are
Yeah.
about them, right?
Mm.
It establishes that you are serious, that you are intentional. If you're not interested in further dates, you'll say, "Hey, I don't think this is gonna go anywhere romantically." Again, this is a whole 'nother segment on dating and
Yeah.
intentionality,
Right.
which we can do, but it shows intentionality.
Yeah.
It shows you are truly interested in getting to know them better, and I think that gives the woman space to say, "Oh, okay. He's really interested. He's really serious. I'd like to show that I'm going to be a partner in this too, and that I appreciate what he's doing." It's not so much a matter of, um, I have to do it for equity reasons. I think
Mhm.
that women do it. They offer to pay as a show of appreciation, as a show that they're in it as much as you are.
So, I mean, actually, I think that was really insightful. I kind of struggle a little bit with this. I mean, I think I would might have said the similar thing, but I like the model that you had there of thinking about it. But how does that actually look like when you're on the date, or like how do you do that?
I think you begin by making it clear that you're on a date. The number one complaint that I
Yeah.
get from single women these days is lack of clarity and intentionality.
Mm.
Hey, you want to hang out? You want to go get something to eat? I mean, that may be a popular vocabulary
Yeah.
these days, but that is not clear and intentional. I would say, I would love to take you out on a dinner date.
Mm.
You've already established that you want to take them out, that
Yeah.
you are going to pay for the bill. So I would say start it at the very beginning, or at the very beginning of the dinner, make clear, "Hey, uh, thank you for saying yes. I am taking care of this dinner," or "I'm so excited to be able to take you out for dinner." So you remove any sort of anxiety or anything like that at the very beginning of the date. Sometimes, and I've seen this happen too on dates, where at the very end, a woman will say, "Hey, can I pay for half of this?" Which I think is very gracious, tells you something about them.
Hmm.
But I would rather prevent that from even
Yeah.
happening by making it clear at the very beginning that I am paying for this. What
Yeah.
do you guys think?
Definitely, fellas, do not send her a Venmo request after the
Oh
meal.
my god.
Well, you did get a second appetizer, so I'm gonna, how does that work out?
Here are the list of things you can
Yeah,
order.
send her an itemized Venmo request.
No steak, no lobster, no
Yeah,
caviar.
everything on this. Like, we have a couple kids menus here. Uh, I guess maybe one question I'd have for you is, what if she says, "No, no, no, I'm gonna pay for this one." What do you say to that? If she kind of takes the lead and says, "Hey, actually, I want to pay for this." What do
No,
you?
I insist.
Oh,
No, I
oh,
insist. If it's a first date or a second date,
okay.
I think after a third or fourth date, once you've established that you are dating,
Mhm.
that I think that's fine. I think
Yeah,
that's nice.
yeah.
Hmm.
I mean, it's been 18 years since I've gone on a first date, or 19 years, but I think that's amazing, and I think making it clear, one of the big things that you said was, "Hey, we are going to go on a date," rather than, like, this really, you know, amorphous, "I don't know what is this?" "What are we?" And so, just making it really clear up front, "Hey, we're gonna go out for coffee. I'm gonna buy it. I'd like to get to know you better."
Yeah, Darren, what do you think?
Yeah, no, I agree with all this. I think one thing that I might add is that I think for some men, they get maybe a little salty about it, or like, why am I the one who's always paying for the dates? And I think that um, something to think about is just like the cost that the women have to, just making themselves look nice and all that. I think they have to spend a lot more money on that than we do. And I think that's something to keep in mind.
That's a great point, and to give grace for the men out there who do feel like, "Well, why do I have to do all of this?" We have to remember we have been raised in a culture, especially in Western culture, where some women get offended at the idea that any implication that they can't take care of themselves,
Yeah,
Right.
who might even get offended if you open the door for them or
yeah,
pull out a chair for them. We
Right.
have grown up in that culture, and So I understand if men are a little hesitant about that. But what I have found is that even the most independent, successful, we're equal. And of course, we're equal as human beings. God has made that clear. We're equal, but different. Even the most independent woman, I think, instinctively loves being taken care of and wants to be taken care of. And I think that's how God built us. Not that she can't take care of herself. Obviously, she can, and she has for her single life. But I think deep inside, they love the idea of a man taking charge and a man taking care of.
That's great. And if she maybe pushes on it and say, "Hey, I really wanna pay," you could always, she's maybe very strong or independent, she's financially savvy. You can always use that as, not a ploy, but as something for your second date. Say, "Hey, you know what? I got this first one, maybe, the second one if you feel really passionate about it, and lock in your second date right there."
I think that's a great point.
Yeah.
You've established at
Right.
the beginning, I asked you out,
Yeah.
so I'm going to pay for the first date. But yeah,
Yeah,
if you wanna
and
go out to
also I
spa,
think
go
it's
for the
just
next
I don't
one.
know, like, I mean, I've had the privilege of living in Scotland and Australia where drinking culture is a big thing, and this isn't even about gender. This is just like, when you're going out with drinks, it's just often good manners to get the first round, and then it's other people might get the next round, but, it's just good manners. Like, what financial conversations should happen before marriage and when exactly? 2 months of dating? Engagement?
That's a great question.
Wes, you wrote a book about this.
Yeah. So, when my wife and I first started dating, I knew that the main things that people fight about in marriage are money, sex, and kids.
Mm,
And so one of the things I wanted to implement early on into our dating relationship was a basic premise of a conversation around money. As this is, and at that time I was like, broke. And so I said, I think the number was it was either 135 or $185 a month. That's all I had for, I think it was 135 a month for all of our dates. That was coffee, Starbucks, any meal that we wanted to go out. This is all that I had. And so it invited her into that conversation of, hey, when this is done, our next date's a walk in the park, or you get to pay. And so introducing that concept early on, I think was helpful for us. But I think that, I wouldn't bring your P&L and your balance sheet to your first date. And here's our Q1. Here's what Q2 look like. Here's a copy of my trust. Here's what you're getting into at this point. But I think having some of those conversations, and the more serious that you're getting, you're not just talking about money. You're talking about all kinds of things. You're talking about life. You're talking about your history. You don't want to just marry someone and then say, hey, surprise, surprise, I've got this baggage of, X amount of debt, or I've got extra kids on the side, or hey, you didn't know all this stuff before. But I think as the relationship progresses, more and more of yourself that you're sharing of, hey, here's a little bit of my story.
We're gonna hit on this when we talk about careers later, but I do wanna ask you now, single men know that a lot of single women, they prioritize financial security, understandably, from the standpoint of just feeling safe.
mhm.
At the same time, that puts pressure on men
Yeah.
financially. A lot of men will make the mistake of going into severe debt just so they can drive a fancy car and
Yeah.
impress a woman on a date, or they'll take a woman to a really expensive restaurant again to show off, to try to land, get that woman interested in them. What would be your advice to men in those situations?
Yeah, you don't wanna put up, a false sense of security. You don't wanna put out these vibes of, "Hey, I can sustain this level," when you really can't. Um, my wife and I, once a week, we go, it's like a silly date, but we go to a workout class together at Orange Theory. And every now and then they'll say, "All right, turn up your speed." And so I'm running, and you're running at this level that is not possible to keep going. But they told me, "Hey, you're gonna push at this pace for 30 seconds." So when people go on these dates, they're trying to run at this pace that is not sustainable
Mm,
for the long run,
It's a
and
great analogy.
they're gonna hurt themselves.
Yeah.
They're gonna run out of, I mean, their heart rate is through the roof, their 195 heart rate, and they're trying to, be there on this date. No, everything's great. Meanwhile, in the back of their mind, when she orders a second drink, you're like, oh my gosh, I hope this goes through. Um, I think setting an accurate expectation, but also, hey, this is not where I'm always gonna be. This is where I'm headed. This is where I'm at today, and I'm making these sacrifices today. You want the type of woman who understands where you're at and where you're going,
Mm,
and not just marries you for where you're going
mm.
or where the anticipation of, "Oh, if I marry Darren, I'm gonna get this," It's like, "Hey, here's where we're at today, but life is always full of that. We are sacrificing this so that we can build that later."
This is why you're a pastor, because of all these great analogies. Orange theory to financial future.
Yeah,
Don't run through the pain or past
yeah,
the pain.
yeah.
Um, Another question I had was, my instinct was, well, don't talk about money until you're engaged, until you know you're going to have a future together. But it sounds wise that you can talk about it earlier than that.
I think that you can. I mean, it depends on you and also where you're at, where their comfort level is at. I wouldn't go too much too soon, and, I was in one conversation with someone, they were newer to our community, and first day, they were just like, "Here's everything," and it was just a lot, but
Mhm.
that's how they were, and so I was like, "Okay, I get it." But I think you can start with, like, little baby steps and, maybe you're not engaged, but you're near engagement, You don't wanna get someone engaged and then say, "Oh, and by the way, I've got X amount of student loan debt,"
Yeah.
after the fact. Like, "Well, I said yes, but now hold on, I didn't know I signed up for a payment plan for the rest of my life." So, I would say have some of those conversations as the relationship is getting maybe more serious. I mean, what would you guys are dating, when
I
did you
would
guys have those
no, I
financial
Yeah,
I would agree
great
with that. No,
point.
I'm keep chuckling
have you
because
guys had those financial
we
conversations?
we have started to
Okay.
have those conversations, but now I'm laughing because I literally, this is an inappropriate thing, but somebody, like, asked my mom out and, you know, starting with his net worth,
Oh,
and, so even before the first date, and I
he's
and sh
like,
and yeah.
"Here's all my accounts." Here's
Which was totally not the way to do that.
But it's
Yeah,
an Asian thing to
That's
do. It's a
too
very Asian thing to do. Just saying.
But
yeah.
yeah, but I mean, I think it depends on the couple. I think before you really make, important decisions, I think it's good to make informed decisions. So I think, whether it's before you get engaged or whether I think it's before you tie the knot, I think it's good to have, like, conversations. I think for myself personally, I like to do kind of the like intentional premarital class or something like that. If not a class specifically, something similar to that to facilitate having these questions before getting engaged. I again with the parking team, I was one of the fellow parking guys. Was like, hey, I just got engaged, and I'm like, oh, that's awesome. I'm like, are you guys going to take the premarital course? He's like, nah, I don't think so. And I'm like, well, like it's really good because it gets you to talk about like things like finances or whether or not you want to have kids. And he was like, oh, I just assumed that she would wanna have kids, and I was like, "Well,
Mm.
maybe you might wanna if you don't take the
Yeah,
class, maybe you might wanna go ask her about that."
yeah, yeah. Wow,
And
yeah.
you said the top 3 reasons for divorce,
Or for
money is at
fighting.
the
Yeah. Money, sex, and kids.
money and money's at the top.
Yeah.
What I've read is money is always at the top because one tends to spend more than the other, and you have to talk about that stuff. And your philosophy, would you say your philosophy about money has to be aligned?
You wanna be as aligned as possible, and so getting as close together as you can, I think is getting you're not gonna be the same, but getting as close together as you can is having a single vision is I think is really important.
Okay.
Is there still pressure to be the sole provider? Is that biblical? Is it realistic?
Oh.
In this economy? Yeah.
Right.
I don't know, that's a very it's not bad. If you can do that, that is a great flex. If you can I mean, I think that's one of the biggest flexes that you can have, but I don't think that there's a biblical mandate of, "Hey, you" or that you have to make more than your wife. I told my wife, "Hey, if you ever wanna go on a speaking tour and write books, I will be your stay-at-home husband. I'll take care of the kids and,
Mhm.
our micro farm, I will do all that stuff," but, I think that's more of a cultural thing over the last maybe couple 100 years in America.
Mhm.
Cultural thing's a great point because I think the verse that people point to, First Timothy 5:8, talks
Yeah,
about providing, also talks about providing for extended family, which
yeah,
was much more of the culture, in the first century. But again, providing is also not just financially
yeah.
providing. It's also providing, security, a safe space, not just physically, but emotionally as well. And I think any partner, any wife is going to understand, even if you don't necessarily make as much as they do, uh, you are doing your best to bring in as much income and as much provision as you can to the family. and you are being obedient because work is a form of worship and doing the best you can to provide is something that is honored by God and I think is honored by godly women. So they'll know that you're providing, even if you're not necessarily making a lot of money or making as much as she is. And it does seem like a necessity now for
Yeah.
both people to work in this economy.
Yeah, I think I have a lot of kind of strong opinions about this just because of what's happened in my family. But I think as far as the fundamentals are concerned, I think like being equally yoked is important.
Yeah.
Yes.
And I think, both contributing to the family and to the relationship is important. And you can contribute in different ways. So
Yeah.
one could be the breadwinner, and the other could be, maybe taking care of the kids or whatever. And I think and when you can afford that, I think that could be a very beautiful thing. I also know that for me, my family, my grandmother, who uh, in the early 1950s, her husband died at a very young age, leaving her with three very young daughters
My.
Mm.
and with no real way to provide. And so it was a very destabilizing thing for her.
Yeah.
But thankfully, my grandmother she was a very smart, capable woman, and so she figured out how to make it work. But yeah, but I saw that and I thought, gosh, I feel like back then it was very much more accepted. That was more the model. But I was like, had she had more of a profession, a career to fall back on or to have a foundation of, I think the family would have been in a much better place.
And I think the Bible does address this in a principle sense, if not in a legalistic sense. I mean, if, in the first century, then the brother would be required,
Yeah.
right, to take care of the widow. But the Bible does talk about communal
Yeah.
responsibility that if there is a widow in your midst, that it's up to all of us to look after them.
So should married finances be fully combined, partially combined, or separated? Why and what does that conversation look like?
Expert right there.
Oh. Well, I'll say this in California. I know that not everyone who's watching this will be in California, but in California, any sort of investment account or anything like that, this is a communal property state. And so if it's not going to be combined or if it's not going to go to the other person, there has to actually be signatures on file that says, hey, these people are going to be separating this. When the Bible talks about when you're married, that the two become one, I think it's so important that, hey, we have a communal vision and a goal that we're going after, and we're going after that with everything that we both have, everything that we both bring to the table. And so, I could just say for my wife and I, for Vanessa and I, we don't have our own separate accounts. But that was something that we went through that difficulty early on in our marriage. Hey, everything is going to be combined. All the good stuff, all the bad stuff, we're bringing it all to the table. And I brought in school debt. She did not bring in school debt, but hey, we're in this together,
Mm.
But I would say bring it all together. And as long as you have that vision, that vision together, here's what we're going after. Now it doesn't become us and them. It becomes we as a family unit are going after this one goal together.
For argument's sake, though, if you can afford it, could it be smart to have a joint and separate? So you don't fight over, hey, why did you buy
Yeah,
that scarf?
yeah,
No, I actually bought it with my own account.
yeah.
Could there be some wisdom in that?
Well, yeah, that would just be along the lines, I would say, within a line item in your budget. Hey, Ted's got X amount of money. Like I have a friend of mine, his wife's like, hey, you can spend this much on golf. I was like, okay, so
Uh-oh,
yeah,
I'm in trouble.
yeah. So when you join LA Country Club and we go there
No,
together,
I haven't. Just for the record.
so when you join and we go together once a week, Ted, uh,
Well, in
when
that case,
yeah, uh, it's just a line item in the budget, and so it comes into the joint, and then it gets siphoned off to, hey, here's your piece, and here's my piece of, hey, I get to go do something fun, and I don't think there's anything wrong with that. It does get a little bit weird when, like, what's mine is ours, but what's yours is yours. That's when it can get a little bit weird. It's like, oh, I thought that
Mm,
we were in this together,
yeah.
and
mm.
so, yeah,
Thank you so much for joining us for part one of our conversation on finance. We hope this challenged you to think more deeply about your relationship with money and its purpose. Stay tuned for part two, which is coming soon. In the meantime, if this conversation encouraged you or challenged you or gave you something to think about, we encourage you to like or subscribe or share it because every time you do like or share or subscribe. It enables us to reach more people and to have more of these conversations. If you'd like to keep in touch with any of our guests, please check out the show's notes.